Prynawn da, croeso I cyfarfod, diolch I chi gyd am dod. Good afternoon, welcome to the Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Full Council meeting of Wednesday, 6th of July 2022. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and may be broadcast via the authority's internet site. The images and sound recording may also be used for training purposes within the authority. Agenda item number 1, apologies for absence. Can I ask Democratic Services if we've had any apologies?
No, we haven't received any apologies.
Lovely, thank you very much. Agenda item number 2, declarations of interest. Members are reminded of their personal responsibility to declare any personal and prejudicial interest in respect of matters contained in this agenda in accordance with the provisions of the Local Government and Finance Act 1992 relating to Council Tax, the Local Government Act 2000, the Council's Constitution and the Members' Code of Conduct. So any members?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I got my hand up. Can I declare my interest on number 7, Penrhydray refurbishment? I'm a governor of the school.
Thank you, Bill. Councillor Lee Davis.
I'm also a governor of the school, Chair.
Can I just check with both members that you're not the local authority appointed member, because if you are, then you have a dispensation. It's only if you are not the local authority appointed member of the governors.
Yeah, I'm the local authority member.
The same
Then you
for
have
me.
dispensation, Councillor Smith.
Same for me as well, Caris.
Thank you. And then I can see the Councillor Lee Davis is also indicating.
Oh yeah, I'm also a local authority governor.
Okay. Guys, if you can lower hands, lovely, thank you very much. Okay, agenda item number 3, minutes of previous meetings, which covers reports 3A to 3C. Do we have a proposer or someone to move this agenda item?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move agenda items 3 to 3C.
Thank you, Councillor Geraint Thomas. And do we have a seconder for this agenda item?
I'd like to second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Barry. And can we put this to the vote, and I'll hand over to the monitoring officer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I ask all those who wish to abstain on this item, please show now. Thank you. Can I ask all those voting against, please show now. Thank you. Can I ask all those voting in favour, please show now. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's carried.
Thank you, monitoring officer. Can everyone lower their hands, please? I think there's a few hands. I don't know if it's a lag on my computer, but there seems to be a few hands still outstanding.
There are a few, Mr. Mayor, if we can just check who that is.
Okay.
So,
Malcolm.
Councillor Colbrand, Councillor Michelle Jones.
Lovely. Thank you very much, everyone.
There we are.
Okay, agenda item number 4, the cost of living support scheme. To consider the report of the Chief Executive, Councillor Andrew Barry will be presenting and moving this report. And I hand over to Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The cost of living support scheme. The report recommendation specifically refers to the discretionary element of the scheme. We as an authority have been tasked with the utilisation of the funds made available for this discretionary element. Recipients are being identified through our council tax and benefits records. Members will know the main scheme provides for £150 of help towards the cost of living crisis. The detail of the main scheme outlined at section 4.6, the outline of the proposed discretionary scheme for this authority is described. The scheme is wide-ranging and supportive of those most vulnerable in our society, including contributions to our food banks. Within the financial implications of 5 are the figures for the funding award and associated properties eligible. In RCT, there are 5 members of staff dedicated to the delivery of this scheme, responsibility for the main and discretionary schemes in both financial and logistical terms. In Merthyr is basically down to Mark Price. Mark took a lead role in the team who delivered nearly £40 million worth of grants through the pandemic. And as we know, on social media platforms, there's been some criticism, and you can go from hero to zero in a heartbeat on social media. But it's pretty much Mark, and perhaps we can explain to our residents within our wards, that's pretty much why the reason we've not got out as quick as other authorities. I am aware that Councillor Minute Vokes' concerns in terms of access and understanding and inclusion within the application process, but this is an area perhaps we can engage with our third sector colleagues for support. And I spoke to Mark earlier about that, Councillor Minute Vokes, about that sort of engagement, and we get some letters out to those. Mark is with us tonight, and before I take you to recommendations, I'll bring Mark in, Mr. Mayor, if that's okay, to give an update on the figures and numbers that are eligible as of today in relation to the delivery of both the main and discretionary schemes. Mark?
To the actual report itself, that it covers the main and both the discretionary scheme, which is what you're going to be deliberating later this evening. The main scheme is formed 2 parts. One, the direct debit. Those council taxpayers that are on direct debit, that we can push a payment directly back into the bank account. We've identified and paid thus far 13,563. Some details I've shared with yourselves a little bit earlier, and some of the processes surrounding the application process that we now engage in with the eligible householders. I can advise you that all correspondence for those that have been identified have now been issued. And to date, the figures that I presented a little bit earlier, we've received a further 192 applications, taking us up to just under 1,500 applications that we've actually received over the last 7 days. There have been logistical problems, as Andrew pointed out there. Initially, the initial setup was partly myself, but obviously there'll be other team bringing it into the process we go forward, and payments will be made in a timely manner. With regard to the actual numbers, we look in a total assistance with the residents of Merthyr of roughly about 26,000 residents of the 27,500 properties. So as you can see, it's quite a logistical challenge that we've undertaken within the Revenues Department. The process for application forms, we look in roughly about 10,500. We're going back and addressing some of those householders that have moved, and to invite them to apply based upon their own property. And some of those that have they weren't captured with the initial direct debit scheme are now going back over to having the opportunity to be able to do so. And again, they will be invited, or if we can push a payment through directly to them, that will be done. The money that is being spent, we've got £3.5 million to spend in respect of the main scheme. And what you can be deliberating this evening, which is of my colleague Andrew there, is 585,000. So we're looking to assist an additional over 2,000 households in bands E through to I, and the additional money that will be left over then to give to the various elements there, which are the food banks, free school meals and children, as was indicated within the report. So if there's any questions anybody would like to ask in addition to what I've already provided today, I'm at your mercy.
Lovely, thank you very much, Mark. I'll take the recommendations, Mr. Mayor. 2.11 simply is the discretionary cost of living support scheme as described within this report be approved. I move, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Barry. Do we have a seconder?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, and in seconding the report, I just like to thank Welsh Government for the support for some of the most, some fantastically needed money during times like we're living through today.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Any questions from members? Okay, Councillor Brent Carter. Brent, did you have your hand? You did have your hand up. Did you have a question?
Yes, sorry, Mr. Mayor. I was on mute, my mistake. Firstly, I think it's the first time I've heard Councillor Geraint Thomas thanking Welsh Government for something, so that's really, really pleasing. Now, Mr Mayor, I thought initially it was a pretty straightforward report, but when you look at it, I don't think it really is a straightforward report. I appreciate what Andrew was saying. I've got a couple of questions as well, but I was quite concerned initially. I feel quite embarrassed, to be honest, in the fact that Mark has been left on his own to implement this. It's such a big scheme of things. It just beggars belief to me that Mark has been left on his own to implement it, and then other people to help set him up. Surely I would have thought that other people would have been involved in this, but that's not my question. This is a point. So I've got a couple of questions. I'll direct them to Andrew Barry, who's a cabinet member, just because he's an experienced cabinet member. So in terms of the food banks or bank, depending on where the report is written, it says bank and banks. Could you tell me what food banks are going to be donated the 50,000 to? Also, have all the direct debit payments for residents been paid? Thirdly, the letters which have been sent out, which I believe are a substantial amount, and a lot of these are for elderly and vulnerable people as well. Yet the letter doesn't offer any sort of other sources, any sort of help. Surely on these letters, we should have put something on the letters for people to call into the one-stop shop for assistance, or a phone number to contact, rather than relying on these people contacting councillors. I thought we'd have been perhaps a little bit proactive with that. So my question is why haven't we offered any alternative means apart from online? So those are the three questions, and I have got a fourth question, but I'll come back to the fourth question if that's okay. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Let me deal with the food bank question first. The very question that I raised, really, in terms of, is it one food bank, is it two food banks? I'm led to believe there are two main food banks that supply our area, one down south and one in the Merthyr area. I'll need clarification on that, because I think the 50,000 will need to be split between the two, or even split between it in terms of what that demand is within each of those food banks, so we have equity split in terms of where that money goes. I'm led to believe as well, Mark can clarify for us what the likely amount will be left over, because it does say 50,000, possibly more, and I'm led to believe it's possibly going to be more. So it's important that we get that right, but we'll certainly be looking into an equitable split if it is the two food banks. I'll take the latter half of your question as well. I'll have to come back to you on a little bit. In terms of the interpretation, absolutely to Councillor Minnick-Vokes's point and email earlier on today, in terms of making sure everybody gets that clarity. And it's something I spoke to Mark about. We will need to engage perhaps with third sector partners and stakeholders to ensure if they get any queries, then they can be directed appropriately to us. But potentially we can look at what our social media presence has been on this. I'm a great believer in going out with more video-based information, because I do tend to agree with you. When we're sending letters out and council letters turn up, do they always hit the target audience? And I'm not sure they do. So I do agree with that. I think they're excellent points. We'll take both of those points up. Sorry, Brett, what was your middle question, your second question?
Sorry, Andrew. Yeah, the middle question, but just to come back on that one as well, I totally accept what you're saying. But what I mean is with the elderly and vulnerable as well, I don't know if social media is also the way forward with that. For me, on these letters, I think personally, and I could be wrong here, but I've spoke to other people as well, but on these letters, I think a contact number for help, or maybe to be directed to the one-stop shop for the people who can't use the internet, who are unfamiliar with that sort of thing. These should have been put on there, in my opinion. So that was that point. And the last one was the direct people who pay by direct debit. Have they all been paid?
Sorry to interrupt. Before you go on to your new question, Alan Owen's got his hand up, and I'm wondering if he wanted to come in under three questions you're already asked.
Oh, and Andrew was asking me about the third question. That's why I carried on.
Yeah, no problem. Alan, did you want to come in? And then Brent can go on to his fourth question.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. It was in relation to the food banks. It was an indicative allocation, which we agreed, but obviously there'd be consultation with the existing organisations, Councillor Carter, who have been involved in distributing food. That's from the CUMTAF footprint right down to the local organisations. That just hasn't been determined yet, because as you're probably aware, there's several sources of funding currently available. So what we didn't want to do is double fund.
No, that's great. Thanks, Alan. I appreciate that.
Lovely, thank you, Alan. Brent, did you want to continue?
Yes, I got a last question. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I won't keep you long. The last question is in terms of page 17 of the report. Perhaps it's just me and the way I'm reading it, but when we're looking at the bottom 4.8 of the report, it says £100 payment in respect of each child eligible for 3 school meals. And I emphasize that respect of each child eligible for 3 school meals, because potentially there could be more than one in each household. But when we look on page 18 in the graph 5.3, it says free school meals at £100 per child times by properties. So if it's 2,269 properties times £100, it works out the figure, the value. But that doesn't tie in to what's saying on the bottom of page 17, because as I'm saying, if there's more than one child per house, that's going to be a far greater figure. So is the wording wrong on page 17 or page 18, or have we got the figures wrong? Perhaps Mark can correct me if I'm...
Bring Mark in there, Brian.
Thank you.
If I may answer a couple of questions that you've raised there, in answer to the last one, the heading is in relation at the top of the graph there, you know, what is representing 150 to the various categories, and then £100 to the council tax. The property is in relation to them. You're right in your interpretation. It is individual children, which follows on from the previous point on there. So it's stand corrected that it is per child as far as that particular element of it, but the items above are per property.
No, that's great. Thanks, Mark. I appreciate that.
And
thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Can I go back and answer a previous question you asked, Brent, if I may, please?
Yes, of course.
Right, you've mentioned regarding the direct debit payers. In answer to your question, simple no. Because now that we've sent all the invitation letters out to the customers, I'm now going back over my records to ensure that everybody's been captured and paid or invited to apply. And I have found a couple that are direct debit payers, and I'm in the process of dealing with those customers and trying to get a payment for them as soon as possibly can.
Thanks, Mark. That's really appreciated. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Brent. Thank you, Mark. Okay, next councillor with questions is Councillor Anna Williams-Price.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, I want to echo Councillor Geraint Thomas's sentiment about the action the Welsh Government has taken to deliver this funding, both for the main scheme and the discretionary scheme. The main scheme was designed for...
I'm sorry, can I just interrupt at the minute? We are having speeches when we should be having questions. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Councillor Williams-Price, but I just need you to ask a question, and then if you've got a comment to make, you can make that when we move on to comments. So can you just go straight to a question, please?
Thanks. So I would like to refer to the decision to allocate funds to households in receipt of free school meals, as I'm sure many other councillors will know. I'm concerned about the working families that are above the threshold and will miss out on further support from the discretionary scheme. And in view of this, I would like to ask why free school meals was felt to be a sufficient indicator of need, and why further consideration wasn't given to families with children but who may not be eligible or just slightly miss out for free school meals. And I also note that approximately just under 40% of the discretionary scheme funds have been allocated to payments to those in band E to I. And looking particularly at bands G to I, this relates to properties of £223,000 or more, far in excess of the average house price, currently estimated to be £150,000 in Merthyr Tydfil. And as such, why was it determined that these households, with no other qualifying characteristic or indicator associated with a lack of resilience against the cost of living crisis, should be targeted to receive additional support.
Al, do you want to pick that up?
Can I assist, Mr. Mayor?
Oh, yeah.
And obviously, colleague, myself, Mark, Steve, and Alan. Obviously, other officers have consulted on this in terms of trying to determine a deliverable scheme. I think that's the issue we have in front of us. In terms of the bands D to I, the conversation we had was in respect of there's a lot of elderly, potentially elderly residents in that, which are still, once they're in a larger property, are still struggling with the cost of living. So that was a conversation we had in terms of commending that opportunity to council. Obviously, it's before council for determination, but that was a consideration that we did make. In terms of going to your point about those just above the free school meal threshold, I think part of the issue we have is how to identify succinctly those people who are in that banding, and it's back to one of deliverability, I think, is the challenge for us, councillor. So if there's further indicators we could apply to it, obviously more than happy to hear that, but our challenge is trying to get this money out of the door where it can have an effect as quickly as we can. But again, as I understate, stress, it's got to be deliverable. So Mark, I mean, I don't know if we've got any further insight into that conversation we had, but that was part of the consideration and deliberation before we put this as a accommodation to councillors. Mark, anything else on the further banding?
Yes, with regard to the banding side of it, the bands are through A through to I. They are what the council tax bands are. The upper two bands, H and I, we've only got 9 properties in total. Those that are in band I would be classed as the nursing homes, so they wouldn't fall within the category anyway. And I've got 2 band H's, one of them may be residential, one might be a nursing home. So what we're actually looking at are those in bands E, F and G, which is the 2,000, as Ellis have said there. They could be just about anything from Castle Park right down to Lakeside and so on, so that they're just general normal households on there. With regard to the funding side of it, as far as the free school meals, it was a deliverable mechanism because we already provide education with a list of all those children that are currently in receipt of free school meals. And it was a mechanism that we believe that we could actually deliver exactly as Ellis has said there, in a very quick and precise manner, and get the money up to the door to those that need it now. And that was pretty much the reason why this free school meals was selected as a subject matter for payment. I hope that clarifies for you, Anna.
Anna, did you have any more questions?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Anna. Councillor David Isaac.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Barry touched on using video and social media, but not all residents have social media and internet. The question is, how difficult would it have been to include a form for residents to fill in and send back to us? As a number of years ago, we included in these letters a leaflet on how to access help in paying council tax to no ill effects of the council itself. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Isaac. I mean, all of these things are new, and we do as much as we possibly can. I suppose the proof in the pudding is how many we actually pay. Mark's on top of that. We'll keep going back to people. How much is enough? We can do videos, we can do social media, we can contact our third sector partners. We can send the letters. I suppose we've got to really look at where we are with it in terms of the outcomes and how many we've got left within the target audience to complete. And I suppose we can take our guide really from Mark in terms of where we are with that and how many would it take, how far off are we from completion of getting the appropriate letters to the appropriate recipients. Would you have any figures on that, Mark?
With regard to the comment that David raised there, the reason that an application wasn't provided is because the software that we've actually purchased from a software provider is for an electronic process. To be quite honest, that within the revenues department, we just wouldn't have the capacity to be able to deal with 26,000 paper applications coming back through. And be able to pay all of these people in the time that's allowed the scheme is to run until the 30th of September. It just would not be practical. With regard to the comment that David had made and yourself there, Andrew, with regard as we go forward, when the bulk of these would hopefully have been paid, when we go back to readdress these individuals that haven't applied at that point, I think at that particular point in time, an invitation, to complete the paper application as well as go online may be more appropriate than it would be now.
Okay, does that answer your question, David? Lovely, thank you. Councillor David Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mark, were letters sent out ward by ward? And did I hear you correctly saying that all correspondence has now been sent for non-DD players?
It was done on a softly basis initially, David, to ensure that the process was robust in the invitation to send applications to the eligible householders. And I did start at the smaller bands initially and worked downwards. It was an element of capacity with myself, with the revenues department, the print section, and obviously the post office. And the last of the letters was being sent out by a printing section today, and so we're going to see a massive upturn because there's been 7,000 letters being sent out in the last 2 days. So in answer to your question, all letters have now been issued from the authority to all eligible householders. And as time goes forward, we'll be looking for those that haven't returned the application to make sure that everybody is captured and everybody will receive the payment, as quickly as possible.
Yeah, thank you. Your answer has answered my follow-on question.
Sorry.
Because I don't pay by DD, obviously I'm waiting for my letter, and I haven't had mine. And to yesterday, only a handful have asked me about when the letters are coming. They're concerned because others have had theirs.
So, sorry, Councillor Jones again. Is this another question?
Can I ask about the order here now? Have we got questions or comments? It's getting a bit ridiculous, like.
We're all questions, and that's what we're trying to make sure everybody does, Councillor Davis. So I was just checking with Councillor Jones whether you had another question to ask.
Yeah, so the question was, Mark had preempted it, is how they all been sent out.
There we are. Thank you.
And thank you for that, Mark. Thank you for the answer.
Lovely. Thank you, Councillor David Jones. Any other councillors got questions? Councillor Andrew Barry, is this a question?
Just to wind up, if there are no other questions, mind you, have I got to wait for comments before
We're going to go on to comments.
Wait for comments.
Yeah, sorry,
no problem. Go straight on. Any councillors got comments? Councillor Andrew Barry.
So just to be clear, that will close the debate, just in case there's anybody else who wants to ask any or wants to say anything. If there isn't, then Councillor Barry's going to close the debate.
Just on that point now, because Karis has said that, I think everyone's been given enough time. Councillor Michelle Jones, will this be a question or a comment?
It's a comment. Just
Lovely,
a comment.
thank you. So we go to Councillor Andrew Barry, please.
Oh, okay.
No, I think Michelle's got a comment first, hasn't she?
Councillor Jones can just make her comment first, Mr. Mayor, and then Councillor Barry will close the debate.
Yeah, it was just to thank Mark and his team for all the hard work. I know it's been really stressful for them, and I just wanted to put that on record. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michelle. Anybody else then before Councillor Andrew Barry comes in? No, Councillor Andrew Barry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank Michelle for her comments there. I'd like to echo what she said there, Mark. again being put under tremendous pressure to deliver this, thousands and thousands of letters. So well done, Mark. Excellent piece of work again. I think it raises a very interesting question in terms of capacity for this authority as well. It's a question that we debated this afternoon in Cabinet in terms of our outturn and our ability to fill our vacancies. And I think there's a body of work we need to be doing now in terms of not just have we got equity of wages and salaries with other authorities, but have we got equity with capacity with other authorities? You know, why should we be down to one officer to deliver such a huge scheme, as made comment by other members? And I think, you know, I mean, it's a question that I put to Rebecca Evans, the Finance Minister, which
You've put yourself on mute, Councillor Barry.
It's a question that Rebecca Evans avoided, and understandably so. It's a difficult question to answer when you're in front of all other authorities. But having said that, we need equity of provision of resource here. And until we get that equity of resource, then we're always going to be down to situations where we're relying on people like Mark to deliver huge schemes. We need to address it as one of the major issues for us in terms of, we've done a capacity review, but the capacity review gets us to a certain level. What I'm talking about now is equity of service provision. And I think we're way off that when you look at the likes of the Vale of Glamorgan, Monmouth and RCT. So it's something we have to address to avoid situations where our residents require exactly the same service as everybody else, in some regards, without deprivation factors, need more service. And when we find ourselves where we have to rely on one officer to get us out, that is just not right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Lovely. Thank you, officer. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Andrew. Right, can we take this to the vote then, please? And I'll hand over to the monitoring officer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I ask all those who wish to abstain on this item, can you please show now? Thank you. Can I ask all those voting against, please show now? Thank you. Can I ask all those voting in favour, please show now? Thank you. That's carried, Mr. Mayor.
Lovely. Thank you, monitoring officer. Agenda item number 5, annual scrutiny report. To consider the report of the Chief Executive, and Councillor Andrew Barry again will be presenting, moving this report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's the annual scrutiny report 21-22. The report is a retrospective view of scrutiny over the past business year, the principles of which we're reminded of at 3.6 of the report on page 22 of your papers. We're also reminded of the 4 S's and the 4 R's, which of course we can all quote now after doing the scrutiny workshops, but it's at 3.8 and 3.9, should your memories need jogging. The public need to see that there's a clear line of responsibility from the directorates, directors, portfolio members and scrutiny committee names, and they need to be clear and aligned. And to that end, paragraph 4.4 is intended to bring that clarity. The authority are striving to continually improve scrutiny, as outlined through section 6 and the annual report itself, appendix 2. Additionally, this year, section 7, page 18 of the annual report, looks at what members and officers, along with support from the WLGA external specialist in scrutiny, have planned for the coming year. It's an excellent report of an improving picture, all in all, Mr. Mayor. I'll take you to recommendations, which is 2.1, 2.2, 2.1, the use of this report and its contents to inform the Council's ongoing scrutiny improvement be approved, and a 2.2, the revised titles of scrutiny committees as set out in paragraph 4.4 be approved. I move, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Andrew. Do we have a seconder for this agenda item?
I'm happy to second this report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lee Davis. And any questions from members?
Councillor Brent Carter, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Carter.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'll go straight into the question. I don't want to go into a row from Caris or from Jeremy at the same point. So the question I'd like to ask is to the leader, to Geraint. When will you be producing a forward work programme? Because this is vitally important to how scrutiny functions. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Carter. As you know, we've just come in as a new administration, and currently there's been a lot of work taking place at this moment of time. And you will see a cabinet forward work programme for the next quarter published at the start of that quarter.
Thanks, Geraint.
Thank you, Brent. Any other questions from members? No. Any comments from members? No. Okay. Can we?
Oh,
is this a question?
Councillor David Jones, Mr. Mayor.
No, it's a comment. It follows on really, and Geraint has answered. It follows on from Councillor Carter's question. As chairs of scrutiny, we're each looking to put our own forward work programmes together. These will mean many hours of officer time to prepare reports, which may need to be deferred because an item proposed by Cabinet that needs to take priority. It's much more sensible that the Cabinet forward work programme is announced so that scrutiny committees can have sight of intended items and plan from these. And I thank Geraint for his comment about the Cabinet work programme will be coming forward shortly.
Thank you, Di. Councillor Andrew Barry? Oh, hold on. Okay. Is Geraint, you coming in here? Otherwise, Andrew will close the debate.
Yes, please. Just on the back of what Councillor Jones just said, and you know, we're in a new world. You know, it's only at the end of the last administration that we started having cabinet work programmes. We've never had one in Merthyr ever before. So it is a new world, and it's something that we've got to get used to rolling forward. So so every quarter, every new quarter, there will be a cabinet work programme, and we will work on a quarterly schedule.
Thank you, Geraint. Brent, I think you've spoken already. I don't know if you're actually allowed to do it again.
Yes, I am.
He hasn't made a comment yet, so Councillor Carter is allowed to ask a question and then make a comment, so he can make a comment there.
Brent, fire away.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yes, really quickly, I just wanted to put on record my thanks to Andrew Mogford and his team for this report. It's an excellent report. And I've been, as chair of transformation for the last couple of weeks, I think the way scrutiny is actually going now is in a very good place. It's going to be a critical friend to everybody, to officers, to the cabinet, to everybody else who's involved, and that's how it should be. So my thanks to Andrew and his team, because I think we head in the right direction in terms of scrutiny to where we were previously. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Lovely. Thank you, Brent. Councillor Darren Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd also like to echo those comments made by Councillor Carter. I've been banging the drum for scrutiny for some time now, having sat on various scrutiny committees over the years and chaired neighbourhood services at one point as well. So, you know, our scrutiny function is critical. It's certainly something that the Improvement Board were concerned about, and I'm also pleased to see that we are moving in the right direction with excellent officers like Andrew leading on that. So yeah, I'd like to also go on record as saying that I'm pleased to see that the scrutiny function is being set up in a different way, and that we can move forward as a local authority and obviously have an excellent scrutiny function that will be the pride of other local authorities, I hope. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Darren. Nobody else got their hand up. So, Andrew, if you want to come in.
Yeah, worrying trend. I'm agreeing with Darren Roberts, and I'm agreeing with Councillor Carter. It is great to see this transformation, to be honest. And I think, you know, what Darren says there, we can have such an excellent service, I think is highlighted to me by something that Councillor Bill Smith said in one of the workshops, when he highlighted the issue of we've been so rigid in how we scrutinise issues, and it's been portfolio bound and very much sort of, you know, compartmentalised. When Bill Smith said, one of the things we should look at is, for example, why the bus service isn't as good as it could be. And that's not something that fits into a portfolio, fits into a box, but it's something that we as councillors perhaps deserve to be looking at for the residents of Merthyr. And I think that's indicative of where scrutiny is beginning to go. That attitude to we can have a wider remit and we can do this differently, I think is to be absolutely applauded. And I agree with Dan, I agree with Brent, and congratulations to Andrew for the work he's done and his team. That we are looking at an improving picture and an excellent future scrutiny programme.
Lovely, thank you, Andrew. Okay, can we put this to the vote then, please? And I'll hand over to the monitoring officer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So can I ask all those members who wish to abstain, can you please show now? Thank you. All those members voting against, can you please show now? Thank you. All those members voting in favour, please show now. And that's carried, Mr. Mayor.
Lovely, thank you, monitoring officer. I'll just give everyone a second to lower their hands. Okay. Agenda item number 6, the Eston Inspection of Local Government Education Services. To consider a report of the Chief Officer for Education, Councillor Michelle Jones will be presenting and moving this report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, the report outlines the findings of Eston's inspection of the local authority's education services, which was undertaken in January 22. Section 3 outlines the framework under which the inspection was carried out, including at 3.4, the 4 questions that were specific to Merthyr Tydfil. Previous councillors were involved in pre-inspection work and would be aware of the documentation that was shared by the director and her team at an all-councillor workshop. Section 4.1 outlines the positives identified within the report, and it is really pleasing to see so many, including the reference to the Raising Aspirations, Raising Standards strategy, which was of course approved by the Council in November 2020. There are, of course, as with any inspections, recommendations, the main ones of which are outlined at 4.2, with the wider recommendations outlined at 4.3. Actions already undertaken to address the recommendations and the department's future plans can be found at 4.4 and 4.5. Recommendations can be found at 2.1 and 2.2 that the proposed actions to meet the recommendations be approved and annual progress against recommendations be provided to council be approved. I so move, Mr. Mayor.
Lovely, thank you, Michelle. Do we have a seconder for this item?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I don't think it's Councillor Clive Jones. I think it's myself. I wasn't quick enough to put my hand up, so I'd like to second our cabinet member on that. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you, Lisa. I presume Clive's got his hands up. We're going to go into questions from members. So, Clive.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to ask a question on page 64, and it's the 6th paragraph down. And I'll read it. Between 2017 and 2019, attendance at primary and secondary schools was the lowest in Wales, and levels of persistent absence were notably high in secondary schools. And I appreciate, that's the end of the paragraph, I appreciate the fact that we've had COVID that hit us in 2020. But my question in relation to that paragraph is the attendance of all schools in Merthyr Tydfil in 2022 improving right across the board?
That's on there, Councillor, and unfortunately, no. I think we've seen a big impact of the pandemic on our primary and our secondary schools, and those in the most disadvantaged areas of Merthyr Tydfil have been disproportionately affected by pupils and by parents not coming back, choosing not to send their children back to school. This was exacerbated by Welsh Government's decision not to issue FPNs and to actually allow parents to use COVID to keep their children home from school. And we weren't allowed to use our normal processes for encouraging children back to school. It was something that's been brought up this week in our corporate panel meetings with certainly with secondary schools, that they are concerned about the number of children who haven't returned. It will affect GCSE results this year because children are not used to being in school and children are choosing not to come to school and parents are condoning that. However, at scrutiny, we did share there has been an attendance grant given by Welsh Government, and we are working very closely with schools to put in quite innovative systems and processes to support them to get their children to return back to school. Working with comms over in August and September to get a big social media campaign out there to get children back to school. And within the community focus schools money that we've had from Welsh Government, the north of the cluster in particular will have new family engagement officers, as will our two most deprived schools outside that cluster area, which is Ysgol Coed Erwin and Ynys Owen, have been given additional money again for family engagement officers. So I would like to be able to tell you, Councillor Jones, that of course we've improved since that statement, but it would be wrong of me to say, but there have been extenuating circumstances over the last couple of years.
Thank you for the answer, Sue. The grant you mentioned, so is that fairly recently, and has that money gone out to all the schools throughout the county borough, or is it just about to?
No, it came out. It came out at the end of the end of the last financial year. So it has gone out to schools that have actually worked with Gavin Metheringham to say this is what we want to do to actually improve our attendance. And there are different strategies. Some are using they got like vending machines as rewards for attendance. Others have employed extra LSAs to ring and encourage children to come back in. One of our secondary schools has re-engaged with the NEST programme, which is a British gas programme, and we're encouraging all our secondary schools to take that back up in September. So there are a number of strategies that are being used. There was the grant was quite specific that we had to target it at year 11. So there was additional money that was put into secondary schools to support that. But we have been informed that we will be having the grant for the next 2 years. So we will be able to do that. On the request of the head teachers, we're going to put back in place, the EWOs out once the term out in Merthyr Tydfil. Why isn't your child in school? The old way of sort of doing that. So we're going back to some of the old methods, which won't work for all parents. But if it gets 2 or 3 children back into school, we're on a winner.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Lovely, thank you, Sue. Thank you, Clive. Any other members with questions? Okay, none are indicating. Any members with comments? Okay, Councillor Geraint Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to confirm about the vending machines, that they're not giving out Mars bars, but they're giving out books. So the obesity problem is big enough in Merthyr, but we need children to read. And I know from experience at Coed Erwin and Hillgerrig schools that the children are in school all week. They can't wait to get hold of that coin, the one with the best attendance, and to put that in there to get a book out. So it's a real great initiative.
Lovely, thank you, Geraint. Councillor Jamie Scriven.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just want to make a few comments about some of the items in the report, the full Estyn inspection report. I was quite lucky to be alongside some other members of the council to attend the Noson Llywelyn with Pen y Dre a few days ago. And I think that's something as a council we really need to be looking to promote now as a best practice model amongst our other secondary schools. Especially in relation to 4.2, the recommendations for Welsh medium secondary education improving along those lines. Pen y Dre has come on leaps and bounds and is a standout in terms of the Eisteddfod events and competitions. It really is a best practice model to go forward with, the way that school is handling our Welsh standards from an English medium school perspective. And that's a big thing when you actually look from the Estyn inspection report that 7% of our 5 and over speak fluent Welsh, and that's below the Welsh average of 16%. We've got a Cymraeg 2050 target from Welsh Government to reach 1 million Welsh speakers in Wales. And if there's any answer to how we're going to achieve that, the answer is within that school and the way they've approached the language from an English medium perspective. So I really want to say well done to that school, and hopefully let's push forward to what that school is doing and replicate that practice in others. Two other things is statutory youth services have been a standout feature in the report. We should be doing more to celebrate the work of our youth services. Youth Work Week has come and gone now. I didn't really see anything much from a corporate comms perspective or online celebrating what our youth services achieve. So perhaps that's something we need to pick up in future and actually celebrate our successes a bit more as well. And the last point was that the Make Your Mark Member of Youth Parliament initiative is referenced within the report to the scheme, something that we need to be aware of, and this is a recent change. Contractually with British Youth Council, that scheme is now going to come at a cost to the authority. So as an example, there's delegation fees that have got to be paid for now. There's probably costs on average for every young person that attends £300, and that's not including the support for actual members of staff to attend and support those young people. This previously was always paid for, but that's changed this year. So it's just something we need to be aware of as a council, that we need to ensure sufficient support is in place financially for those services if we're going to continue to engage in those types of schemes, because they are in the report. These are elements of good best practice. Just want to ensure that we continue to commit and support them.
Lovely, thank you, Jamie. I've got three other councillors indicating to speak. I did think Councillor Lisa Mitten was next, but on the screen now it's Gareth Lewis.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Estyn inspection or local government provision of education, I believe, is testament to how far education standards and attainment have progressed. The previous Estyn inspection, some members that were around at the time will remember, back 10 years ago, that the education services were deemed inadequate and placed into special measures. This presented the local authority with acute challenges and a long period of intense and vigorous Welsh Government scrutiny. Subsequently, measures were removed in 2016. This inspection demonstrates that under the leadership of the local authority's Director of Learning, who I believe has been in post since October 2017 now, so education has made good progress, and it's pleasing and no doubt a relief to officers that no external intervention has been recommended following January's inspection. The inspection identified a number of positives. These include the Raising Aspirations, Raising Standards strategy, the Merthyr Tydfil County Borough-wide Youth Forum, safeguarding, and the response to COVID, amongst others. It's important that we highlight and recognise these positives and commend the local authority's education staff, especially that they have experienced the most turbulent and unpredictable times working environment in recent years. On behalf of the Labour Group, thank you for your dedication during this unprecedented period. Of course, there are challenges ahead, facilitating our young people through enhanced social, emotional and behavioural difficulties has rightly been focused on in this report, and the Labour Group look forward to seeing what the future provision of Welsh medium secondary education will look like in the near future. And of course, as was mentioned earlier, attendance needs to be seriously focused on. As elected representatives, we all have to take collective responsibility for the criticism of the scrutiny of education. And with the right support, which I believe is now in place, collectively we can and will make inroads on this recommendation and ensure the executive is robustly challenged whenever appropriate. I must add, however, that it's disappointing that the leader failed to mention the Estyn report in his recent interview with Anthony Lewis, the local democracy reporter. It was a missed opportunity to praise hard-working education staff for what is essentially a good inspection during the most challenging of times.
We have comments or questions, just out of interest.
Yes, we're on comments and he's making a comment.
Fair enough, sorry.
That's okay.
It remains unknown if education will become a key political priority of the lead independent group. We await the Independence Group retrospective election manifesto to see if it does.
Lovely, thank you, Gareth. Councillor Lisa Mitten.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really do appreciate it. Just a couple of things, observations in relation to some comments made. I just wanted to reiterate that I'm fully aware that there was an event for the Carmarthen Cluster Schools this year, and there are other planned events over the next academic year as well, across the whole of the county borough, including all of our schools, not just Penydre. However, I was in attendance, and I echo what Councillor Jamie Scrivens has said. It was a fantastic evening and a fantastic event. Councillor Gareth Lewis, there were some real positives in your observation then. However, as you can imagine, I'm going to back. Okay, I know that you've made reference to the leader in his recent Wales Online report, but let me remind you that when I was leader, I actually commended the team when we actually first talked about that Estyn report back in a full council prior to the elections, and just touched upon it and just echoed my thanks as the then cabinet member for education. And also, of course, if you remember, our school staff as well, and not forgetting, most importantly, our children. Okay, so just wanted to reiterate that point because it's really important. And as a member of the independent administration, let me assure you that education will continue to be a top priority, and I will take absolute pleasure in working with Councillor Michelle Jones as Cabinet Member for Education as the chair of the scrutiny for this particular area, in making sure that that is included in the manifesto and goes forward. And on that note, I just want to also thank you as my vice chair for that particular scrutiny. I think the way that we've started that and kicked that off really will show that some of those actions that we're looking at, we're including in our forward work plan, and also that you and I together with our colleagues can ensure that robust scrutiny really does continue for education and LASCIP. So thank you everybody. Thank you to Councillor Michelle Jones, and obviously thank you especially to Sue Walker and the team, the wider team, for all that they've done in getting such a positive report, undoubtedly with some actions, but a positive report all round. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Councillor David Hughes.
Well, I was going to thank Sue myself, but so many of you thanked her now. However, one thing I like to point out is that with attendance, in my work alone, I've had 3 people off with COVID. So COVID's still around. There's a lot of children in our area who had COVID. In neighbourhood services last week, out of team 11, we had 8 off with COVID. So what we got to remember is in Merthyr, there's a lot of COVID around. So with the children not attending school, that could be one of the reasons why the attendance haven't gone up. So not that I'm champion children being off school, but there are circumstances why children aren't in school. So I think we got to remember that COVID is still around, but I would like to thank Sue and her team and all the teachers, and as Lisa said, all the children for all what they're doing. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, David. Any other comments from members? Okay. Gareth, can you lower your hand? I can see it on my screen if that's all right. And then...
Apologies, Declan. I've been trying to, but things are sticking, unfortunately.
Councillor Lewis, can I ask you, if you just press it once and then take your hand, there you go. Take your hand away now.
I think it's all done now.
That's it. That's great.
Apologies, Mr. Mayor.
Not at all. Not at all. Okay. Can we put this to the vote then, please? And I'll hand over to the monitoring officer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So can I ask all those members who wish to abstain, can you please show now? Thank you. Can I ask all members who wish to vote against, can you please show now? Thank you. And all members voting in favour, can you please show now? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's carried.
Lovely. Thank you, Monitoring Officer. We'll just give everyone a second to lower their hands.
Mr. Mayor, while you're doing that, my hand is still raised. I just want to let Democratic and the monitoring officer know I have to turn my camera off for a minute because I just need to move to a different part of the building. So I'm still here. I'm walking with my laptop, but I don't want to take you on a tour. So I am listening in.
Lovely. Thank you, Lisa. Okay, all hands are. Agenda item number 7, Penedre Major Refurb Band B Sustainable Communities for Learning Programme. To consider the report of the Chief Officer for Education. And again, Councillor Michelle Jones will be presenting and moving this report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the full business case for the Penedre Major Refurb project has been submitted to Welsh Government, and we are awaiting final approval to commence the construction project. £11.4 million of matched funding was set aside in the Council's MTFP as a contribution towards the estimated project costs at the time. This was around January/February time. Design works to fully scope the project have now been finalised, and a final project budget has been agreed, which increases the Council's required contribution to 13.1 million of the total 46.6 million budget. This additional matched funding is an increase of 1.7 million on the 11.4 million budget agreed in the MTFP, and is estimated to cost 87,000 per annum in capital financing costs. 100% of the net zero carbon costs within the project budget will be met by Welsh Government, and when completed in early 2025, Penedre will be the first net zero carbon in operation refurbished school building in Wales. Inflation has been fully scoped within the project budget, and inflation risk has been incorporated within the proposed contractor's contract offer for the project, which means additional inflationary pressure would be borne by the contractor. The project will take place over 3 phases. Phase 1 will be a full academic year starting in September. Phase 2 and 3 will be approximately 2 terms each. Pupils will be moving into different classrooms spaces, which are all within the existing building for the first 2 phases, and all classrooms will be set up with everything needed to deliver the curriculum from September, and so impact on pupils will be minimum. Some temporary accommodation will be required for the last phase, but the exact scope of this is yet to be determined, although clearly an allowance in the budget has been made for this. This report seeks approval for the additional matched funding required to finance the project, and subject to this approval and approval of the FBC by the Welsh Government, the project can commence on site in July 2022, with a scheduled completion of January 2025. Therefore, I move to the recommendation that the financing of the local authorities match-funded commitment to deliver the Penedre project set out in section 5.1 be approved. I so move, Mr. Mayor.
Lovely, thank you, Michelle. Do we have a seconder for this agenda item, please?
Yeah, can I second, Mr. Mayor, and in seconding, applaud Welsh Government for what they have proposed in terms of the support for net zero carbon. It is ambitious. It is the type of money that we as an authority absolutely have to put in the support. It is an excellent programme. It is an excellent report, and we couldn't spend our money better. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Lovely, thank you, Andrew. Okay, we're going to go on to questions from members. Councillor Brent Carter.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure what's in the water tonight with Geraint and Andrew back in Welsh Government. I'm not quite sure. I can't understand it. I think I'm in a parallel universe. Sorry, Caris, I'll get the question.
You knew I was going to interrupt you then, so just go to the question. Yeah. Thank you.
I just want to take Michelle to page 81 of the report, 5.2. Michelle, you talked about the extra money, which the capital's money, which is the council has got to contribute, which is 1.7 million. Can you tell me where it's coming from, please?
Not from my pocket. Can't afford that. Sorry, can I refer that to one of my officers to answer, please?
Yes, if I could answer that one. I think it's best if I come in and just answer that one. Yes, that £87,000, we're hopeful that we are able to actually accommodate it within our estimates at this point in time. We've included for capital financing costs around £6.8 million for this current financial year, and then that goes up to about £7 million up to 24-25. What normally happens with capital schemes is that you may get some capital schemes that will slip into and just into following years. So just at this moment, we still feel that we are able to accommodate that within existing estimates. But and also we just will have a look at how we plan to borrow for this coming year and then next financial year as well. So will it be the case that we look at more shorter term that we just have done? But so I'm still comfortable that we just should be able to accommodate it within our existing budgets. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. So yeah, it does. Yeah. So just to confirm, the extra 1.7 million, you comfortable that you can accommodate into the existing budgets?
Yes, it's obviously with that 1.7 million pounds. It's the actual revenue impact, which is at £87,000, which we just have to accommodate.
Lovely. Okay, thanks, Steve. That answers it. Thank you. Thanks, Michelle.
Okay, thank you, Brent. Any other members wishing to speak, wishing to ask a question? Okay, Brent, can you lower your hand? And we're just going to go on to comment. Thank you. On the comments from members, nobody indicating. Okay, can we take this to the vote then, please? And I'll hand over to the monitoring officer.
Councillor Andrew Barry has indicated. Councillor Salmon.
Okay, let's just come up late. Okay.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm pleased to hear within the report, as Michelle has mentioned there, that the inflationary pressures for such a huge build will be taken by a combination of Welsh Government and by the contractor itself. I'm on record as saying many occasions about the inflationary pressures within the building industry, known to many to be 20–30% as opposed to the 9% or 10% in domestic inflation. I mean, the worrying trend is that only 3 months ago, in March, we were looking at an inflationary figure of 5.4%, and already that's doubled. Worrying trends as there's hyperinflation in the building industry, but I'm satisfied, and it'll keep close. We need to keep a close eye on those costs increasing, but it's good to see that they're being covered, because without that, this authority would be exposed to a huge risk financially and could do real damage to us. So I'm really pleased you've covered that off, Michelle. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Barry. I think this time we go to take it to the votes, and I'll hand over to the monitoring officer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So can I ask any member who wishes to abstain on this item, please show now. Thank you. Any member wishing to vote against, please show now. Thank you. Any member wishing to vote in favour, please show now. And that's carried, Mr. Mayor.
Lovely. Thank you, monitoring officer. Just wait a second now for everyone to lower their hands. Councillor Gareth Richards. Lovely, thank you. Okay, agenda item number 8, the anti-money laundering policy and anti-tax evasion policy. The considered report of the head of Regional Internal Audit Service, Councillor Andrew Barry, will be presenting and moving this report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Anti-money laundering policy and anti-tax evasion policies. We have 2 policy documents to consider under the authority's strategy for counter fraud 21–24, which supports our effective governance measures, which will assist Audit Committee and the wider Council in assessing the Council's risk management arrangements and general control environment. The policies identify roles and responsibilities, aims, objectives, fraud risks, action plans, and fraud response plan flow charts. The Governance and Audit Committee have sat and considered the policies on the 4th of April. These policies have already been adopted across the regional audit footprint by Bridgend and the Vale, RCT doing something slightly different. We have the anti-money laundering policy at Appendix A and the anti-tax evasion policy at Appendix B for members' reference. I'm aware we have a lengthy agenda tonight, so rather than, other than to say we have Mark Thomas here with us tonight, one of the authors of the report, for any questions, I'll take us to the recommendations, Mr. Mayor. 2.1, the Council's anti-money laundering policy be approved and at 2.2, the council's anti-tax evasion policy be approved. I move, Mr. Mayor.
Lovely. Thank you, Andrew. Do we have a seconder for this agenda item?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I second the report.
Lovely. Thank you, Councillor. Any questions from members? Councillor Brent Carter.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Don't sound too happy that I'm asking a question again, mate.
I'm just shocked there. Normally it's Clive. I do apologise.
I know you're dead right. I was going to mention that. You're right. I just got a couple of questions in terms of this, if that's okay, Mr. Mayor. That's the first question. They are relatively straightforward. The first question is in terms of the money laundering report and the reports received. Have we received any at all into this authority? Any money laundering reports? That's the first question. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
If I could answer that, well, then, yeah, if I could answer that one, and as far as I'm aware, no. But Mark is also on the call, so I don't know if Mark wants to respond as well.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Good evening, everyone. Nice to be back after 3 years when I changed jobs. So first council meeting with Merthyr for 3 years. So yeah, just to sort of support what Steve said, really, there's been no reports of money laundering at Merthyr for many, many years, if at all. I seem to remember one going back donkeys years ago, but nothing in recent years at all.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Steve. My last question, Mr. Mayor, doesn't necessarily connect directly to money laundering, but it comes into the overall strategy which money laundering falls into. I appreciate the local investigators were transferred across the DWP back 5 years ago, roughly. I know quite a lot about that. But can you tell me what the impact in terms of revenue being received to the authority and the criminal statistics which have come back in terms of that? Have we lost out in any way? And is that a direct result of perhaps you're employing a fraud investigator now? I appreciate it's slightly different, the anti-money policy, but it comes under the whole the counter-fraud strategy.
Happy to try and address that, Councillor Barry. Happy for me to try and address, yeah. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Carter. Yes, you're right. We did have a dedicated fraud team in Merthyr going back many years ago, and when DWP made the decisions they did to centralise the benefit fraud investigation functions, nearly all authorities lost staff to that function. Some authorities maybe retained 1 or 2 members of staff, but most authorities lost basically their fraud investigation capacity almost overnight. Basically, there was a Wales Audit Office report, I think it was last year, it sort of identified that sort of loss of capacity across the board, essentially. So I'm pleased that Merthyr Tydfil has recognised that now and put money in the budget to fill the post of an investigator, and that person was appointed about a month ago. She's employed by Merthyr Tydfil, but she'll be working closely with the Regional Internal Audit Service to basically pick up the mantle and help deliver the anti-fraud strategy and the action plan associated with that. And part of this report is actually making sure that all the appropriate policies are in place, ready for when she started. In terms of loss of revenue, that's a difficult one to answer directly. If I'm honest, Councillor Carter, going back many, many years ago, there were incentives in place for authorities to identify fraud and used to get money directly from DWP for doing that. That changed many years ago because authorities were very successful in identifying fraud and getting money in from those incentives. But basically, what we hope to be able to do, and part of the logic for recruiting a fraud investigator, by undertaking proactive investigations and dealing with referrals, we'll be able to take action to recover lost monies. We've been doing that through the National Fraud Initiative in any event, and it is hoped and envisaged that the post would be more than self-financing over a period of time, but it's difficult to give you sort of any categoric numbers or anything relating to that, Councillor Carter.
No, that's great. Thanks, Mark. No, that's okay. If you want to come in, yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, just to add to it, really, in terms of, with occupational health, we brought that back. We brought a fraud officer back, and it's that self-reliance in terms of a robust approach to our business that I think is to be applauded. And it's a bit of a no-brainer with fraud. You know, a fraud officer should wash their own face, really, shouldn't they? You know, if we know it's there and we can pick up enough business, not that it's we want to see fraud, you know, but if it's there and we can pick it up and they cover their costs, it can only be a good thing. But I'm really pleased that we've got a fraud officer back.
Brent, any more questions?
No, that's all right. Thanks,
okay.
Declan.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Andrew. Any other members got questions? Okay, any members got comments? Brent?
Yeah, I just want to echo a couple of things Andrew and Mark have said, actually. For me, you know, I'm an accredited financial investigator, so this subject is quite close to where I am from. I welcome this report, especially welcome the appointment of a fraud investigator, and this is something which is definitely needed. And Andrew is quite right. My opinion, this position will become self-sufficient and they should pay for themselves. So I really welcome this report and look forward to seeing what potential results and outcomes come through in the pipeline over the next year or two. So thank you very much, and I welcome the report.
Lovely, thank you, Brent. Councillor Darren Roberts.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, I'd like to welcome Mark back. Welcome, Mark. Nice to see you again, although a backdrop of Merthyr Tydfil would be far better than the Vale of Glamorgan, I'm sure. I also welcome this report. You know, it's fair to say that the local authority over recent years has given out a substantial amount of money in grant funding, and whenever there's money, unfortunately, there's going to be fraud and money laundering. So, you know, I'm more than happy to support this agenda item and the appointment of the officer that's going to be heading it up. So, yeah, excellent report, and look forward to seeing more. Well, less hopefully from this. I don't want to see anything coming forward, because you know it's a bit of an oxymoron, isn't it? You don't want to have any instances or cases, but at least we know we covered and we should be able to pick up on it should it occur. So well done all.
Lovely, thank you, Darren. Any other members got comments? Okay, nobody indicating. So Darren, can you lower your hand and we'll go to the vote, and I'll hand over to the monitoring officer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So can I ask all those members who wish to abstain on this item, can you please show now? Thank you. All members who wish to vote against, please show now. Thank you. All those members wishing to vote in favour, please show now. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's carried.
Thank you, monitoring officer. I'll just give everyone a second to lower their hands. Lovely. Okay, agenda item number 9, expansion of Flying Start. To consider the report of the Chief Officer of Social Services. Councillor Julie Jenkins will be presenting and moving this report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The expansion of Flying Start, the summary report. The purpose of this report is to agree the expansion of Flying Start services across the county borough. The report sets out the current approach to Flying Start, along with the critical aspects of the Welsh Government guidance to the expansion. In addition, the paper provides an analysis and way forward that is achievable given the September 2022 expansion date as set out by Welsh Government. This is considered phase 1 of a far wider expansion that will eventually lead to a full geographical coverage of Flying Start across the entire county borough. The report also recommends how the programme will deliver in line with its existing cap figure, as birth rates have decreased across the original areas, meaning the programme is not operating to its maximum. The latest childcare sufficiency assessment identified that the birth rate in these areas is not expected to increase in the near future, and therefore alternative arrangements can be introduced to this area. Go to the recommendations. The expansion proposal set out in 5.6 as namely Park 3 are the most deprived,
which are not currently Flying Start, and they start in September, which is additional 68 children, increase the outreach capacity by 15 children, meeting the 83 target set by Welsh Government. Then it's 5.7, proposing in the short term, being September 22 to April 23, we do not expect existing early language development or parenting teams borough-wide to meet capacity or demand, giving time for review of what the services should be to full expansion and allow for development. We have 5.8, to target those areas in the top 20 to 30% that have been highlighted, providing childcare is available. When more update analysis becomes available, they will be presented to members for consideration, particularly highlighted areas being Vena 1, Treharris 4, Plymouth 3, and Town 2. Then we go to 2.2, the proposal to address the cap figure through addressing postcodes identified in 6.2 be approved. So 6.2 then is existing LSOAs already approved by Flying Start within the top 30% have excluded postcodes put into the programme, reaching another 90 children approximately, leaving only 2 current areas with excluded postcodes. New residents will automatically be eligible for Flying Start. And then to go to 2.3, the proposed approach to the expanded outreach model Appendix E be approved. I so move.
Thank you, Julia. Do we have a seconder for this agenda item?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to second it. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you, Michelle. We're going to questions from members, and Councillor Kevin Gibbs is indicating.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just pleased to see this, but I'm just wondering, obviously this is only phase 1 of the expansion. Do we have any sort of time frames of when the rest of the borough will be part of Flying Start?
Can I pass this over to Chris Hall, please?
Yeah, happy to take the question. Hi, Councillor Gibbs. No, unfortunately, Welsh Government have not provided a timeline as yet for the wider expansion. There has been some discussions around 3 years, 5 years, but they have not committed anything in writing in order to really confirm what that will be at full rollout.
Lovely. Okay, thanks, Chris. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. That's my questions.
Lovely, thank you, Kevin. Councillor Scott Thomas.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Absolutely sort of great to see the expansion of Flying Start. However, my question relates more to circumstances should obviously a provision that has obviously Flying Start under their remit. Should they lose locations due to redevelopment or demolition of properties within obviously postcodes, obviously they are likely to lose finances because of that, because obviously they are losing then obviously children within that thing. How is that going to be sort of addressed? I know obviously we are implementing new areas, however in the timeline of where they've lost finances in respect of this to obviously now where they're going to gain from the expansions, some provisions may have lost a significant amount of money, and I was just wondering if there's any scheme or any sort of opportunity where that can be addressed in future.
There's no one-off scheme to address that. If there are significant demolition in areas of streets which would reduce the number of children in that area, there is no automatic scheme that they could go to for further resources. But what's been encouraged with childcare across the county budget is not to be dependent solely on Flying Start. So they are able to take in children from almost any part of the county borough through a mixed economy model. So they're doing private childcare as well as Flying Start childcare.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Scott. Councillor Gareth Richards is indicating.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a point of clarification, it is, Chris, with regards to the excluded postcodes in Appendix D. Are the areas in bold those areas which will now be obviously included within Flying Start?
No, the ones that will be included are those in the top 30%. So it's Treharris 3 at the top. It does not include Bedlinog 2 because that's the top 40%. And it does not include Cyfarthfa 1, the top 60%.
Right.
So then those further down, Cyfarthfa 2 in the top 10%, Cyfarthfa 3 top 30, Gurnos 3, Gurnos 2, Merthyr Vale 1 and Pendarren 2 would be the areas that would be expanded to take in those excluded postcodes.
Thank you, Chris. You've clarified, because I thought it was all the bold ones, and obviously there's far more then than there is places available. Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Lovely, thank you, Gareth. Any other councillors wishing to ask a question? Councillor Louise Minded-Vaux.
Oh yeah, sorry. A question is for Chris. I know it's in relation to the outreach model and the reliance on the recruitment of health visitors. Is there any further update? Because I know it says like it's likely to, unlikely to impact. But I was just wondering if there is an update from health in relation to that recruitment drive for those health visitors. Thanks.
Yeah, Health have had recently had a very good response to recruitment drive. They have got health visitors lined up ready to be able to meet the requirements of the programme. And the Health Board have actually signed off the full approach in terms of the outreach and the expansion today, because it was a requirement from Welsh Government that they had to be consulted with and they had to agree the report, and they are in complete agreement with it. And they've confirmed that in writing to us today. And they are raring to go, basically. I think
okay,
sorry, I was going to say, I think the other bit is when we move further along in the expansion phase, there is a national discussion about the lack of health visitors and the potential for using a skills mix approach, which would use community nursery nurses to assist health visitors in the delivery of those responsibilities. But that discussion is taking place on a national level as well.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Chair.
Lovely. Thank you, Louise. No other councillors indicating for questions, so we'll move on to comments. Any comments from members? Okay, first of all, Councillor Darren Roberts.
Fastest finger first, Mr. Mayor. Get in there. Flying Start is an integral part of our children's, young people's development, and we are very fortunate in the Merthyr Vale ward to have an excellent childcare provision in Trinity Childcare Centre. Scott mentioned earlier about the demolition, and Chris, you answered the question there. For me, what I would like to see is, if possible, a bit of an overhaul, because we all know that it's a bit like a postcode lottery sometimes. There are some streets, for instance, where one side of the street would be covered by Flying Start and the other side isn't. So, we needed to be a little bit more equitable in that respect. But, Merthyr Tydfil is one of the most deprived local authorities in Wales, as we know. And Merthyr Vale, it has been established, is one of the most deprived wards in the county borough, because we've been allocated funding through Invest Local. So, what I would like to see, if possible, is a broader approach to try to mop up as many families and young children as possible. Obviously, all members would want it for their ward, but I can only speak, obviously, for the residents of the Merthyr Vale ward, and that's what I would like to see if possible. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you, Darren. Councillor Kevin Gibbs.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just want to clarify. Thank you. I do welcome this report coming in, because every little help that we can give to our deprived children and families is going to be a massive boost. Little bit disappointed that it is only 87, but hey ho, you can only go on the processes and procedures that are set out for you. Excuse me. I'd just like to say thank you to Chris for getting the information on the actual postcodes of which streets are actually covered by Flying Start and which postcodes aren't. And I'd like to thank Democratic Services for sending that information out to all councillors this afternoon. So thank you, Chris, and your team for getting that information for me. Thank you, guys. thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's me done.
Lovely, thank you, Kevin. Councillor David Hughes.
I think I have to be a bit quicker on my thumb, my finger, because Kevin asked the question I was going to ask. Look, I really applaud this this report. However, I'm disappointed that it isn't wider, and I'm disappointed that Chris can't tell us when it's going to be right throughout the borough. But as Councillor Gibbs said, hey, one is better, one extra is better than none in it. So that's all I like to say. I would like to have seen it go right through the borough, because, as Darren said, there's areas in Merthyr which are deprived, which aren't in this report, haven't been included in this report. And there's some areas which I find are more affluent, which are, so there you are. That's the way reports go, and that's the way maps. I don't know if the map was drawn up, but I would wish to see it right through the Merthyr area, and especially through our deprived areas. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you, David. Councillor Geraint Thomas.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Chris, for bringing our report this evening. We all welcome the report. Flying Starts is a fantastic service. What we'd like, though, is as soon as we can speed it out right across the county borough in its entirety, to give an equitable service for all the young children in Merthyr, because it does certainly give them the best possible start to life. So, as soon as we have news coming from Welsh Government, Chris, please pass it on to us.
Lovely, thank you, Geraint. Any other councillors wishing to comment? Okay, none indicating, so we're going to go to the vote then, please, and I'll hand over to the monitoring officer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So can I ask any member seeking to abstain on this item, please can you show now? Thank you. Any member voting against, please show now. And any member voting in favour, please show now. And that's carried, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, monitoring officer. I'll just wait a second for everyone to lower their hands. Yep, and I've just put mine up. Okay, on my screen it's saying Ernie, Jeremy and Lee. Okay, that's all hands. Agenda item number 10, Market Stability Report. To consider the report of the Chief Officer of Social Services. And again, Councillor Julia Jenkins will be presenting and moving this report.
Thank you, Mayor. This is the full council report. The author is Sarah Mills from the Regional Partnerships Board. The Market Stability Report of Cwm Taf Morgannwg. The summary report is Section 144B of the Social Services and Wellbeing Wales Act 2014 requires local authorities to prepare and publish market stability reports and makes provision for regulation setting out from these must take matters to be included and the prescribed period for carrying out market stability assessments as set out in the Partnership Arrangement Amendment and Regulated Services, that's the Market Stability Reports of Wales and Regulations for 2021. The regulations are also amend the Partnerships Arrangement Wales Regulations 2015, so that the preparation and publication of market stability reports must be carried out on a regional footprint, with the local authorities and local health boards working together through regional partnership boards, which is RPBs. The regulations require local authorities to produce market stability reports every 5 years, with the first report aimed to be published by June 2022. The local government elections on 5th of May 2022 meant that it was not possible to gain approval of the MSRs, which are market stability reports, until new cabinets were formed. The market stability report therefore provides a strong platform for regional market shaping to meet current and future needs. The report will help inform and shape the next 5-year area plan, along with 2022 Cwm Taff Morgana population needs assessment. If you go to recommendations, Council is asked to endorse the market stability report, which is being produced on a regional basis to enhance an understanding of the regional market for care and support in line with the legislation requirements. I so move.
Thank you, Julia. Do we have a seconder for this agenda item?
Second, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. Any questions from members? I see Councillor Clive Jones is indicating.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is on page 148 of the report, and it's under the heading recommendations, the 4th dot down. I read it, it says, action should be taken to remedy the underutilization of capacity in local authority owned homes. Can I ask why we've got underutilization of beds in our own local authority homes when there are certain patients who require residential care? They can't. I understand there's a problem about patients being taken out of hospital to go to certain accommodation. Why is there an underutilization now on 2 homes?
It's quite a lengthy answer, so if I could give this to Lisa Curtis-Jones to answer, please.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Jenkins. Thanks for the question, Councillor Jones. So, as you'll be aware, there's obviously care homes were massively affected by the pandemic. As a result, we have got beds available within our internal care homes. One of the things that the market stability report has highlighted is the need for different services within our care homes. So we probably need more EMI beds, more dementia beds, that sort of high level complex needs within the care home rather than residential beds, and that's where we've got a number of vacancies. So I can speak obviously for our 2 homes, the T Barger and T Gurnos. As you'll be aware, we changed some of the ways we've used the home. So for example, there are 4 wings at T Gurnos. One was turned into the learning disability wing, so we wanted to use those empty beds there, and we've also got another empty wing there. So the plan is that we are looking and working with health around step up, step down beds. So as we've looked at the market stability report, there's definitely a sort of a need for dementia beds and that complex needs of older people. And we also need to look at step up, step down with regards to that discharge planning in hospitals. T Gurnos is a perfect sort of position in the sense of, it's close to Prince Charles Hospital and it's an opportunity for us to look at. So that's part of the plan and part of the process on what we need to do, look at some of the vacancies. And that's the same for the other 2 neighbouring authorities.
Yeah, thank you for the answer, Lisa. So follow-up question is, do we have any patients in Prince Charles and for that matter, Mountain Ash Hospital who are waiting to go into residential care in our 2 homes and can't be accommodated?
We've got, I don't know the number off the top of my head today, but they're sort of down to single figures they were recently. We've got some that are waiting placements, but they are awaiting assessments to be moved on. So they're, looking at assessments as to where they need to be placed. The ones that we've got that have been waiting for a longer period of time are those who are sort of complex needs, CHC, and they need that sort of joint assessment with health. So that's been the delay because they've struggled to sort of have the discharge nursing assessments within the health remit. But we meet regularly. I think there's a 2-weekly meeting with health now at the front door with our Stay Well at Home service. And we are looking at all those cases. So those who can move on, where we've had vacancies, have moved on. And obviously those who can't because of other reasons are still in the process of being assessed.
So it's down for you, Mr. Mayor, to assessments being carried out by health board staff then.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're moving now to the joint assessment approach through with Stay Well at Home, but yeah, it's difficult because there's not sort of the district liaison. I think they call them district liaison nurses available at the minute.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, Clive? No. Okay, Councillor David Hughes.
I'm glad to see the step down and step back out to the hospital is being looked at. I think we looked at this, Lisa, about 3 years ago. We had the meeting with the health setup, but they didn't want to contribute to the cost of the people coming to our homes. Can I ask you that you make sure that if they are told to bring people out to hospital into our homes, that they pay a going rate so that the authority aren't being charged?
I think it may be appropriate that Councillor Hughes just lost sound at that point, but I think probably Lisa is able to answer what he was going to say.
Okay, I think I'll interpret my answer to what I thought he was going to say. Councillor Hughes, yes, we did explore this sort of 3 years ago, and there were issues around finance. I think one of the issues we're looking at the moment is that sort of integrated approach, working with health more closely and what adult services and health can do together to make the sort of smooth transition of people being discharged from hospital, much easier. Finances will be considered. Realistically, local authorities doesn't want to be sort of left with the costs, and if it's beneficial to health, we need to look at that joint funding and how it will be approached, and part of that will be through the regional partnership board and some of the new funding that's coming through there through the RIF funding that's been sort of planned over for the next 5 years. So it's all at the moment, they're the discussions that are taking place.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Lisa. No other members are indicating to ask a question, so we'll go on to comments. Any comments from members, please? Nobody's indicating. Okay, we're going to go on to the votes, and I'm going to hand over to the monitoring officer, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So can I ask any member wishing to abstain on this item, can you please show now? Thank you. Any member wishing to vote against, please show now. Thank you. Any member wishing to vote in favour, please show now. And that's carried, Mr. Mayor.
Lovely. Thank you, monitoring officer. If everyone could lower their hands. Just give it a second now. Lovely. Okay, agenda item number 11, agreed syllabus for religion, values and ethics. This is an information only report. Agenda item number 12, Welsh and Education Strategic Plan. This is also an information only report. Agenda item number 13, to deal with any other urgent business or correspondence. I haven't had any. Agenda item number 14, to receive communications from their worship the Mayor. I haven't received any. Agenda item number 15, I'm going to hand over to the monitoring officer to take us into a section 100 in order for agenda items 16 and 17 to be discussed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can somebody please move section 100?
I'm happy to move section 100, Mr. Mayor, monitoring officer.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for that?
Happy to second, monitoring officer.
Thank you. Can I please take that to the vote then? All those in favour of moving to section 100? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's carried, and so we'll need to move into closed session. So can I ask Democratic Services